Ladies and gentlemen, it's David Hall here, founder and chief executive of the Ideas Centre, and here to share with you an ideation technique based all around drawing, referred to as storyboarding. Now we start with the usual process of problem redefinition, taking the problem as defined by the problem owner and then effectively supercharging it as the problem is understood, and that's covered in previous video scribes, so I won't dwell here. What the facilitator then does is to provide everyone involved with a sheet of paper. A4 is fine, A3 is great because a larger piece of paper allows more freedom of expression with the drawing process. What each participant then needs to do is to take their piece of paper and divide it into 6 segments. My recommendation is turning it landscape and then just marking the boxes 1 through 6. The facilitator then asks each participant to draw a representation of the problem in box 1. What is the current situation? The problem is understood. Try a way of articulating it via the drawing mechanism. What they then do in box 6 is do another drawing, but this time of the problem totally solved. What does it look like with the problem totally solved? And they need to find some way of representing that using their artistic skills. As a facilitator, one of the key things here is to make sure there are no words or numbers used, which are very left brain, and we're trying to encourage right brain thinking. This technique can be done as individuals, each with their own piece of paper, but in order to do that, each must be able to have a reasonable understanding of the problem statement. But then it can also be done collectively as a group, or gathering around a flip chart maybe, when everyone can then get their creative juices flowing and end up with some interchange across the group. The beauty of the drawing process is that you're tapping directly into the right-hand side of the brain. And it's there that novel ideas are created involving new connections in the brain. Once boxes 1 to 6 have been completed, you then ask each participant to fill out boxes 2 to 4, telling a story in cartoon form of how you start with the problem and end up with the problem solved. And it must be unconstrained by any reality whatsoever. What we're using here is divergent thinking, where any sense of judgment is suspended for the period of the drawing process. It can be bonkers, ridiculous, outrageous. You're looking to create a novel and useless story. It'll explore all sorts of creative ideas, but it will be impossible to implement. The key thing is, however, that it must solve the problem, if only it were possible, and we refer to that as the intermediate impossible. That being a classic stepping stone towards the creative outcome that you're looking for, a novel and useful idea. Once those drawings have been completed, it's then a matter of exploring in detail each of the storyboards. Then select the most powerful of those storyboards, the one that most convincingly will solve the problem, and then investigate it to identify the key characteristics of that storyboard that make it work. Because each of those drawings is effectively a metaphor for something in the real world, and all we have to do then is convert it. And we do this by finding an idea in the real world that has exactly that same set of characteristics. It's often easier as an intermediate step to worry less about the organisation in the immediate moment and look for any example of any action somewhere in the real world disconnected with the organisation that has exactly that same set of characteristics. Use that as a bridging mechanism, because then what you can do is take that example of an action in the real world and adapt it specifically for the organisation in question. And then bingo, you end up with the germ of an idea which is both novel and useful. You can implement it inside the organisation in the real world, but it has all the characteristics of the novel storyboarding solution. And that's all there is to it. Storyboarding, a really elegant idea generation technique.